Hello, I'm Robert Millet. This lecture series is entitled Feeding Our Faith, Starving Our Doubts. Today's lecture is entitled Doubting Our Doubts. Before we can begin to doubt our doubts, sometimes it's necessary to do a little introspection, to look inside, to examine ourselves. It was the Apostle Paul that wrote, "Examine yourselves whether ye be in the faith." I like that. Prove your own selves. Questions we might ask when examining ourselves. One is, do I hold a current temple recommend? It was President Howard W. Hunter who, during his very brief ministry as president of the church, spoke a great deal about temples. Let me read you a couple of statements from President Hunter. Let us truly be a temple attending and a temple building people. We should hasten to the temple as frequently, yet prudently, as our personal circumstances allow. We should go not only for our kindred dead, but also for the personal blessing of temple worship, for the sanctity and safety that are within those hallowed and consecrated walls. As we attend the temple, we learn more richly and deeply the purpose of life and the significance of the atoning sacrifice of the Lord Jesus Christ. President Hunter also said on another occasion, I invite the Latter-day Saints to look to the temple of the Lord as the great symbol of your membership. The things that we must do and not do to be worthy of a temple recommend are the very things that ensure we will be happy as individuals and as families. I would add, the things that we agree to do or don't do in our temple recommend interview are things that if our answers are correct and we're being honest, are the things that will entitle us to, at the time of death, enter into paradise and eventually be resurrected into celestial glory. I've thought about over the years the things as people, members of the church that I've met with over the years that are concerned about making it, concerned about making the celestial kingdom. Years ago, when I was serving as bishop and in the southern area of the country, it occurred to me to occasionally try something. After I had asked all the questions and the persons had answered them properly and correctly, I would say, well, there's actually just one more question I have, and that's this. If you should at this moment drop dead, fall to the floor, and your spirit should immediately be ushered into paradise, and in fact, taken from there into a celestial glory, into heaven, which kingdom of glory do you suppose you would attain? Would it be the celestial kingdom? Would it be the terrestrial kingdom? Would it be the telestial kingdom? I was always interested that about 7 times out of 10, the member of the church that I was speaking to, almost all of which, faithful and obedient, would answer something like, oh, I don't know, maybe the terrestrial kingdom? And I would say, so let me see if I understand you correctly. Have you been answering honestly? Yes. So you haven't lied to me about any of these things? No. You're not hiding something we need to talk about? No. But you plan to go to the terrestrial kingdom. An answer like this usually came, well, I don't plan to go there. It's probably where I'll end up. And I'd say, why is that? And the person inevitably would say, well, Bishop, I'm not perfect. And I would usually kid them a bit and say, really? Ooh, I didn't know that. And then we would have a really good discussion about what it means to be perfect. The Savior's command and commission, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. You know, that word perfect means a type of completion, thoroughness, wholeness, I think of it as integrated. James, in his epistle, the Lord's brother, wrote that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Well, the opposite of that would be a person who has it together. That is, there's no double-mindedness, or their eye is single to the glory of God. We have every reason, brothers and sisters, if we are temple recommend worthy, and if we use that temple recommend as often as we can, we have every reason to believe we're headed for the celestial kingdom. And of course, Satan would have us believe otherwise. He would have us become discouraged. I really believe that to be the case. I think far more of the Latter-day Saints will make it than we sometimes think. You know, a second question we might ask ourselves in doing our kind of personal examining ourselves, am I finding satisfaction and fulfillment in my church membership? Many years later, from the time I was bishop in the South, I was called as bishop of our ward here in Utah. And I can still recall sitting on the stand one Sunday during sacrament meeting and just looking out over the congregation. And this kind of thing happened every once in a while. I'd find my attention on one particular person or family. This time, I found myself focused on the husband and wife, a lovely family. A handsome young man, a beautiful young woman, 4 or 5 lovely children. But they were on my mind, and I had a feeling that perhaps I ought to meet with them. I remember talking to my executive secretary and saying, see if Brother and Sister Brown, let's say, can come and visit with me. We found a time and a day, and the husband and wife came in. Before I could say anything, I remember Sister Brown said, well, we wonder why it took you so long. I said, what do you mean? Took you so long to call us in? I said, why is that? She said, because we've wanted to talk to you. We visited for quite a while, and then finally one of them said, I think I can sum up our concern this way. Is this it? Is this all there is to it? I mean, she speaking, I was faithful in my young women years. I received my young women's medallion. I did all the things I was called upon to do. I married in the temple. We have 5 beautiful children. And he said, well, I grew up. I was a Cub Scout. I was an Eagle Scout. I was on a mission, and I married in the temple. And they ask again, is this it? Is this all there is to it? We talked for some time about this. It seemed to me that somehow they had begun to suppose that the great end in our lives should be being active in every aspect of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Well, we certainly should be. But what I began to sense more and more as we visited on more than one occasion was this. They were working towards something that really isn't an end in itself. It seems to me that one of the things we ought to be looking toward is trying to lift ourselves or be lifted by our Heavenly Father spiritually to the point where we begin to really know God, really begin to know God. This is life eternal, Jesus said, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom thou hast sent. If it's life eternal to know him and to know the Savior, then there must be a way or ways to do that. And as I worked with this couple, I tried to help them come to understand the value of personal as well as family scripture study, how to make their prayers more meaningful, how to go to the temple and come out joyfully. Sadly, they didn't take my counsel, and before too very long, pulled out of the church. They later did more than that. They pulled out of the church, and to some extent at least, as so often happens, when they leave the church, they can't leave the church alone. They became bitter. And I've thought about that a great deal. I've been grieved that I couldn't have had more influence on them, trying to help them see that the great purpose in life, one of the grand purposes, is to come to know God. And so when we were determining, am I finding fulfillment in my membership, part of that is, am I focused on end goals that are of greatest significance? President Dieter F. Uchtdorf said the following: I wonder if we as church members might also benefit from asking ourselves from time to time, is my experience in the church working for me? Is it bringing me closer to Christ? Is it blessing me and my family with peace and joy as promised in the gospel? Many members will answer with great warmth that their experience as a member of the church is working exceptionally well for them. Every day I meet church members who are filled with a radiant joy and who demonstrate in word and deed that their lives are immeasurably enriched by the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. President Uchtdorf, Elder Uchtdorf continues, but I also recognize that there are some who have a less than fulfilling experience. This saddens me because I know firsthand how the gospel can invigorate and renew one's spirit, how it can fill our hearts with hope and our minds with light. I know for myself how the fruits of the gospel of Jesus Christ can transform lives from the ordinary and dreary to the extraordinary and sublime. That's the end of the quote from Brother Uchtdorf. Falling out of the church is a lot like falling out of bed. I've fallen out of bed before. And almost always, the reason I fell out of bed is that I found myself on the edge of the bed, and from there I would make a move and fall out of bed. It's not terribly profound insight that what I needed to do more was be more toward the center of the bed, more toward the middle. And so it is with our lives. A person that is on the far right, whether it's religiously or socially or politically, and a person that's on the far left, extremes often are dangerous in either direction. When it comes to the gospel, we need to be focused. We need to stay in the middle of the bed. Elder Bruce R. McConkie said in a devotional address at Brigham Young University back in 1982, he said, he called and cautioned the Latter-day Saints to stay in the mainstream of the church. Now, to me, that means stay where the apostles and prophets are. Counsel others with the counsel we receive from them. Listen carefully at General Conference. Note how the leaders of the church take the scriptures and basically commentary upon them. Keep our eyes on the president of the church. Elder L. Whitney Clayton of the 70 said this: we shouldn't be surprised when we suffer a failure of faith if we walk on the margins of the straight and narrow path. What we do and don't do really matters because actions have consequences, as does inaction. When we become inattentive to the small, daily, repetitive but essential actions of belief, we weaken our roots. Over time, we slowly draw away from God. Elder Clayton continues, thus the way to speak to each other, the books and articles we read, the television shows and movies we watch, the things we don't read and would never watch, and the jokes we choose not to listen to or repeat, all reflect where we are on the straight and narrow path, in the center or on the edges. We can't claim to be nourishing our roots if the things we do and don't do aren't calculated to make us better saints. Safety is found only in the center of the straight and narrow path. Just before leaving that point, I want to say something, that question, I want to say something about a word I hear a great deal. Way back, a long time ago, when I first became a student at BYU, I remembered sitting in one of my classes, and somehow in class, the matter of, the matter of standards and requirements at Brigham Young University, including dress and grooming and morality, was brought up. We were early in the course, early in the semester, and the person raised next to me, about 2 seats down, raised his hand and said, "I just think the whole thing is hypocritical." And the professor said, "What do you mean hypocritical?" "Well, I just think to ask us to do those kinds of things, to expect that of us, to take a university that wants to become a world-class university and burden the students with those kinds of things, just to me seems hypocritical." The professor asked the class, "Anyone here have a comment?" And I said, "I do." I turned to him and I asked, I said, "Are your parents making you come here? Is this a requirement for you?" "Oh, no, I could have gone many other places." "Well, then I ask you, why did you come here?" I said that there are all kinds of hypocrisy, and one of them is signing a document saying you're going to be true to the principles and practices and behavior expected of Latter-day Saints on this campus, and then coming here and griping about it. We know the word hypocrisy has to do with, a hypocrite has to do with, literally, as the Greek language would have it, putting on a mask. Basically deceiving, seeking to deceive others. It isn't making a mistake. It isn't even breaking a commandment and not being able to correct it immediately. It's not just doing wrong, making mistakes, sinning even. No, we're all guilty of those kinds of things. Hypocrisy, rather, is pretending, putting on. But there's another kind of hypocrisy. It's another side of the issue. Let me read to you something from Elder Neal A. Maxwell. There's another kind of hypocrisy, one less obvious, but just as serious. A second form of hypocrisy, the situation in which we let ourselves appear worse than we are. This form of hypocrisy is just as insidious and may be more widespread than the other form of hypocrisy, the situation in which we let ourselves appear better than we are. The second form is apt to be a heightened challenge because of the growing uniqueness and size of the church. It will be increasingly tempting for members of the church to play down their convictions and their commitment, to appear less committed than they really are. Question number 3, if we're to examine ourselves, and as kind of a precursor to discussing what it means to doubt our doubts, examining ourselves. And so this third question is this: am I in harmony with the leadership of the church? Most of us sing, we thank thee, O God, for a prophet, with gusto, with enthusiasm. The leaders of the church sing it. I'm sure that when President Nelson sings it, he's not singing, we thank thee, O God, for me. I think they look to the prophet Joseph Smith, the prophet of the dispensation, the head of the dispensation. We sing that fairly regularly in the church. We thank thee for a prophet, and frankly, for prophets and apostles. Sometimes, though, we're not as thankful for the things that come from them. Elder Ronald A. Rasband of the 12 taught, "We have sustained leaders today," they have just sustained the leadership of the church, "who by divine inspiration have been called to teach and guide us, and who are calling out to us to beware of the dangers we face each day. From casual Sabbath day observance, to threats to the family, to assaults on religious freedom, and even to disputing latter-day revelation. Brothers and sisters," he said, "are we listening to their counsel?" I've always enjoyed reading the words of Samuel the Lamanite. In Helaman chapter 13, let me just read these words. He's basically talking about why people reject prophets. I'm going to read from chapter 13, verses 25, 26, maybe 27. And now when ye talk, ye say, If our days had been in the days of our fathers of old, we would not have slain the prophets, we would not have stoned them and cast them out. Behold, ye are worse than they. For as the Lord liveth, if a prophet come among you, and declareth unto you the word of the Lord, which testifieth of your sins and iniquities, ye are angry with him, and cast him out, and seek all manner of ways to destroy him. Yea, you will say that he is a false prophet, and that he is a sinner, and of the devil, because he testifieth that your deeds are evil. But behold, if a man shall come among you, and shall say, Do this, and there is no iniquity. Do that, and you shall not suffer. Yea, he will say, Walk after the pride of your own hearts, yea, walk after the pride of your eyes, and do whatsoever your heart desireth. And if a man shall come among you and say this, you will receive him, and say that he is a prophet. I've always appreciated the following from President Spencer W. Kimball. This was many years ago. I think it was about 1978. But in General Conference, President Kimball addressed this same issue, how we receive or do not receive the words of prophets. President Kimball: The holy prophets have not only refused to follow erroneous human trends, but have pointed out these errors. So often the prophets have been rejected because they first rejected the wrong ways of their own society. I love this. Prophets have a way of jarring the carnal mind. It is because of their love and integrity that they cannot modify the Lord's message merely to make people feel comfortable. And listen to this. They are too kind to be so cruel. I am grateful, President Kimball concludes, that prophets do not crave popularity. Early in this dispensation, the Lord, in a revelation through the prophet Joseph Smith, said the following. This is section 90 of the Doctrine and Covenants. Listen to the language of the Lord here. This March 1833. Verily I say unto you, the keys of the kingdom shall never be taken from you, the Lord speaking to Joseph Smith, while thou art in the world, neither in the world to come. Nevertheless, through you shall the oracles be given to another, yea, even unto the church. The oracles here meaning the revelations from God. And all they who receive the oracles of God, let them beware how they hold them, lest they are counted as a light thing, and are brought under condemnation thereby, and stumble and fall when the storms descend, and the winds blow, and the rains descend, and beat upon their house. Beware how we hold the oracles of God. Question 4. Am I in any way undermining the faith of another person? Are there things in what I do or what I say that's not only affecting me, but affecting those all about me? President Henry B. Eyring, speaking to church education system personnel some years back, talked about the need to exercise caution in how we teach, especially what we teach. He referred to an institute in which a young woman named Kathy, by the way, that was his wife, had attended a religion class. The teacher tended to take a devil's advocate approach to the class, to be sure that the students understood all sides of an issue. When Kathy confronted the instructor about his unusual manner of teaching, the teacher replied, "Well, I want to strengthen the students, and they'll be stronger if they have to resolve these things for themselves." President Eyring indicated that there was one student in particular who heard what was said in class and spent much time trying to resolve the problems. A few years later, President Spencer W. Kimball asked about this particular young man. Then he asked if I knew the teacher. Then he asked if I knew what was happening in the classroom. I answered yes to all of those questions. He said, "Do you know where the student is now?" I answered no. He said, "He has left the church." President Kimball didn't say anything reproachful to me. He just said these words that are still in my mind as clearly as if they were just spoken to me. They were not in anger, not even in rebuke. He just named the teacher and said, oh, I hate to be him in the judgment." This question on not only are we living our life, but are we speaking things that prove in any way hurtful to people, that could in some way shake their faith? That's a serious offense. If I have struggles, if I have concerns or challenges with my testimony, then I should go to the right people, whether it's priesthood leaders or those who have background in history or doctrine that can help. But to just spread my doubts left and right to anybody willing to hear, that's dangerous business. We're dealing there with the souls of men. Now, those are some things we can think about in terms of assessing ourselves or doing a check on how we're doing. All of those related eventually, you see, to whether or not we stay strong in the faith. In order for a person who has spent many years in the church to leave, it's often necessary for him or her to reconstrue their past, to look back on their past and say things like this: I suppose that this and this that I believed at the time was a revelation really wasn't. Or I think that occasion when I was in the temple and had this experience probably wasn't that. They have to reconstrue their past. One has to deny what he or she has learned about such matters as the following. Listen to these. In other words, what have I learned from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, from its doctrine, from its leaders, about such issues as the following? Who am I? Why am I here on earth? Where did I come from? What will become of me after death? Has God spoken anew in our day through prophets? Is what I experienced at the time of my baptism or endowment or temple marriage real? Have I felt the power of the Savior's atonement in my life, enjoyed a remission of sins, and received an infusion of Christ's divine enabling power? Is what I felt and experienced as I read the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price, and listened to addresses of living apostles and prophets from God? Have I witnessed the power of the priesthood in my life? Is the knowledge that families can be forever a sham? Is it a falsehood? Am I prepared to throw it all away and denounce what was once more powerful than sight? Some are bothered when they read or hear of a member of the church who has done something that is inappropriate or that is wrong or that is against the law. Those outside the faith are ever so eager sometimes to point it out to us. But sometimes a person does that and it affects members of the church. Sometimes those members are so upset that this took place and that this man held high office that they're thinking about leaving the church. Many years ago, then Elder Boyd K. Packer gave an address on this. It was entitled, "Judge Not According to Appearances." Elder Packer. At times, someone has come to me, their faith shaken by alleged wrongdoings of some leader of the church. Such incidents, which supposedly involve church leaders, are described as evidence that the gospel is not true. that the church is not divinely inspired or that it is being misled. He begins to ask some questions that I think are really good questions. Listen, have you ever in your life attended any church meeting, priesthood meeting, sacrament meeting, relief society, Sunday school, a conference, or a fireside, where any encouragement or authorization was given to be dishonest, to cheat in business, or take advantage of another? Have you read, or do you know of anything in the literature of the church, in the scriptures themselves, in lesson manuals, in church magazines or books, in church publications of any kind, which contains any consent to lie, to steal, to misrepresent, to defraud, to be immoral, to be vulgar, to profane, to be brutal, to abuse any living soul? Why then, when you hear reports of this kind, should you feel that the church is to blame? There's no provision in the teachings or doctrine of the church for any member to be dishonest, or immoral, or irresponsible, or even careless. Have you not been taught all of your life that if a member of the church, particularly one in a high position, is unworthy in any way, he acts against the standards of the church? He is not in harmony with the teachings, the doctrine, or with the leadership of the church. Why then should your faith be shaken by this account or that of some alleged misconduct? With these things in mind, let's talk for a bit about what it means. President Dieter Uchtdorf, in one of his major addresses in General Conference, spoke on the need to doubt our doubts. Let's talk about that. What are some ways we can doubt our doubts? I sat down one day and thought about this concept. How do you doubt doubts? You see what's being said here? It's that we spend as much time and effort analyzing why we're doubting as we may have spent trying to gain a testimony of this or that to begin with. Generally speaking, people never do that. They never spend the amount of time or the quality of time in trying to investigate clearly what the claims of critics are. Here's what I wrote this. To doubt our doubts is to be courageous rather than cavalier when it comes to those things about which we feel some uncertainty. We cannot, for example, afford to allow ourselves to be casual in our doubting of doubts, for to do so is to yield to mental and spiritual laziness. Just as the Lord needs competent and committed disciples, so each one of us should never take doubt lightly or allow a doubt to reign when in fact it has not won that lofty perch through proving itself beyond all doubt. Just as for me it takes too much faith to be an atheist, to witness, for example, the order and precision of the cosmos, or the complexity of the human body, and still hold to an agnostic or atheistic posture. So we should not be so kindly, such a pushover, as to allow our faith system to go by the way without intellectual and spiritual kicking and screaming on our part. To conclude, think about this, my dear friends, my brothers and sisters. God knows all things. He knows all things, including what He has made known to you and me, including what He's told us by inspiration, by revelation. We must not treat such knowledge, such inspiration, lightly. We must not cast it away cavalierly. It came from Him. Jude, the brother of the Lord, wrote one of the books in our New Testament. It's a short book, but I love this phrase. Here's the challenge he offers that I offer to you and me. We need to earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered to you and me. Contend earnestly for the faith which was once delivered to us. In other words, our faith is worth fighting for. President Russell M. Nelson counseled this, and I love this. Choose to believe in Jesus Christ. If you have doubts about God the Father and his beloved Son, or the validity of the restoration, or the veracity of Joseph Smith's divine calling as a prophet, choose to believe and stay faithful. Take your questions to the Lord and to other faithful sources. Study with the desire to believe rather than with the hope that you can find a flaw in the fabric of a prophet's life or a discrepancy in the Scriptures. Stop increasing your doubts by rehearsing them with other doubters. Allow the Lord to lead you on your journey of spiritual discovery. As we said earlier in this series, doubts do come along. They come along every once in a while. We find ourselves in the midst of a doubt or a doubting situation. But they were never intended to stay there. They were never intended. They should be temporary at best. As we take the time to not only express gratitude for all that God has made known unto us, but to think upon it and to remember it and to cherish it more and more. And as we pay the price needed to search out answers to our questions, they need never remain in the realm of doubts. I testify of the truthfulness of the restored gospel, of the reality of living apostles and prophets. I testify that the church is divinely led. I can still remember in his very first General Conference address as president of the church, an aged President Joseph Fielding Smith said something like this. He said, "This is the church of Jesus Christ. It is the church of the Lord, and he is at the head. He calls men and women to serve in his kingdom, but all the glory and honor that can come from what they do should be attributed to him." And then he said, "If this were the church of a man, it would fail. But it is the church of Jesus Christ, and he does not fail." That you and I won't fail him and those who paid such a dear price to bring us where we are is my hope and prayer. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.